Chapter 18, 29th day of October, 1679. Mistress Cellier! Mistress Cellier! Make haste, they come for you! A large muscular frame filled the doorway. Little Maggie and Peter abandoned their task of shelling peas opposite me at the table and looked up with open mouths. Heavens, Dowdall! What wild beast drives you so hard you forget your manners? I dropped the chopping knife onto the wooden kitchen table, scored by the making of many family meals, and though scrubbed daily with a brush, stained by many hot pans and cooked meal spills. That turncoat, Willoughby, has sent them here. They will lock you up and hang you as soon as walk through that door. What do you mean by this, Dowdall? I scolded. The captain shared our roof and considered him a friend to us. He may be indiscreet, he may act the fool, and he may even play false, but he would not sell those that saved him to the devil. Does it not shame you, making such accusations? I did not wish to alarm the children, but they were already shifting from their chairs. He is no friend of this house, Mrs. Cellier. Just as oats lay as a snake in the Jesuit nest, Willoughby has turned in yours, naming every dwelling and tavern he had dealings in, every Popish man and woman he visited with note or letter or message. I tell you, madam, the servant that dwelt among us has sent the authorities here, and you must go. But that is impossible, Dowdall. I looked purposely at the children that had come round the table to stand behind my skirt. Where would I hide with my children? Who would take such fugitives? Forget the children, I will have them. Only go and hide yourself and your husband with haste. Where is Monsieur Cellier? He has gone from here to Manchester on business. He is safe for now, but I cannot leave my children. Maggie flung her arms around my skirt and cried, Ma'am! Without a thought, I rested a hand on her shoulder for a moment. I'd looked to little Peter, only a year younger than his sister, yet so much younger in his mind. He watched without understanding what was occurring, so I turned and crouched low into Maggie's arms and reached out and hugged the two of them together. I could never leave them. Get yourself to safety. Go now, ere it's too late, growled Dowdall with such urgency. I could not doubt him. Without further thought, for I trusted Dowdall implicitly, I held my two wide-eyed offspring close one last time, then left them both and the burning stove and fetched my cloak. Dowdall was dry and coatless, but my destination was uncertain, and being the last days of October, I might later find myself fugitive in a cold or wet night. Suddenly I stopped and faced my husband's man. Why must I run? I have no reason to run. If you have not, then that is for you to prove. Willoughby is no captain and no gentleman. He is a rogue with neither the name he gave you, nor even some of the devotion he showed you. Do not try your hand with the courts. They do not care for truth. Go hither and be safe. Willoughby, not Willoughby? What nonsense was this? Not content with pitting religion against religion, nor neighbour against neighbour, the government would as well put the burden of conflict on those within a household. Their spies were in the bosom of every house and home in London, and perhaps elsewhere too, suckling on the kindness of wet-nurse households, then biting on the nipple that fed them. I never imagined we would embrace such a one in the heart of our own home. I never imagined Willoughby would wilfully harm us. Go, repeated Dowdall. I have the children. Dowdall stood back and gestured urgently. If fortune should allow me to return to my children, I must stay safe for them. I nodded, looked round the kitchen one last time, seeing the fears of Maggie and Peter in my mind, the faces, and then moved quickly towards the door. My foot was no sooner over the threshold than something attached itself to my elbow and halted my escape. Whither go you in such haste, Madame Cellier? I straightway recognised the voice beside me of that of Justice of Middlesex, Sir William Waller, for good reason better known to Catholics as the priest-catcher. His zealous Protestant reputation less found its way to me, but more fought its way, cutting left and right along the path of hatred, felling good folks of any other religion with his scythe borrowed from death. He was also well known to be tight with Titus Oates at the Green Ribbon Club, some said in bed together. As well, like Justice Walkup, the man was responsible for zealously burning many papal books, vestments, paintings and other documents in large public bonfires. I believe I am openly invited to partake of a sip of mulled sack with you. It was true that when he came 2 days before, Waller asked me to invite him in for a drink, and I told him another time, but I had never intended that time to come. His visit came shortly before Susan brought news from the jail of Willoughby's apparent torture, told to her by himself, though I did not then set the two together. Though he searched, I knew not what he expected to find. He proved nothing against me. He took many important and personal financial papers and possessions, and kept them to examine them, but found no evidence I nor any of my household had done any wrong. He kept our things still. That time he had come with only 2 men, and he had tried to take me from my home to Lord Shaftesbury. Again, I knew not for what reason. I had told him, I have no business with the Earl of Shaftesbury, and if his lordship has any with me, he might have sent one of his servants to tell me so, and I would have waited on him, as I am still ready to do, without needing a justice of peace to take me. But what authority have you to carry me there? To his pompous, His Majesty's Commission of the Peace. I promptly answered, though that empowers you to send me to prison if I am accused of any crime, it gives you no power to carry me anywhere else. He showed surprise at my knowledge of the law, but then went on to accuse me of being a dangerous woman and of keeping correspondence with traitors, and further accused me that I did something wrong by taking in the young Jesuit witnesses come over from France for the Jesuit trials. I was pleased to remind him that the king had commanded them to come. I also told him only those convicted of treason can properly be called traitors. Do you know of any such that I keep correspondence with? I am sure I know none. While he talked with me, his men opened cupboard doors, pulling things from inside and letting them drop to the floor. They also turned drawers of papers, cutlery and any other thing they came across onto the floor, scaring my little ones by their surly manner, abrupt actions and loud noise, presumably looking for hidden compartments. When they opened my cupboards of medicines, I screamed at them to stop, and surprisingly they had stopped. If you touch my herbs and ointments, I'll have the king himself come and find you and whip you. They are my business. The men looked from me to Sir Waller, not knowing what to do. Look in that cabinet with care, men. We are not here with malicious intent and would not take this woman's livelihood. I detected he was not sincere, but the men seemed to think he was, and took the bottles, bags and pots from the shelves and laid them on the table, not as carefully as I would have liked, but careful enough. In his determination to find me guilty of something, Sir Waller ignored them and returned his steel grey eyes to me. Will you take the oaths of supremacy and allegiance? This challenge was so often made before throwing a good Catholic man or woman in jail these days. I was fully expectant of it. He would have me swear the oath of allegiance to test whether I would abide by the 400-year-old law that every subject of the kingdom should swear his or her allegiance solely to the king and his heirs. The law stood against all religions but the king's. Since my religion was public knowledge, making me swear the oath of supremacy, an allegiance that is a renunciation of the Pope's authority, was an unnecessary ordeal, but one that could become the instrument of my incarceration. Many feared that if a man's loyalty was to the Pope, that he must be set against the king, Though this was not the case, most Catholics were loyal to both king and God. That fact did little for the good men that were recently removed or had resigned from Parliament when they refused to swear these oaths. Though the law stood against other beliefs, it was common knowledge a person was never prosecuted unless they had upset a person with power to accuse, for it was not in the king's financial interest to prosecute. Any persons not attending weekly church must pay a sum to the king, and if they executed or exiled these people, this income would quickly dry up and leave the king's coffers very much emptier. It angered me that Sir Waller asked me to speak these oaths, and so I told him. You do not have any authority to ask me this, unless another justice is present. But if there were another here, you should remember I am a foreign merchant's wife, and my husband, both by the general law of nations and those by this kingdom, should remain unmolested in both his liberty and his property, unless a breach happens between the two crowns. The king has declared as much in his royal proclamation. If you violate the privileges my husband should have as a merchant stranger, the King of France, whose subject my husband is, has an ambassador here by whom we will complain to his majesty, and I hope we should obtain redress. He left my upturned house soon after with his thin lips and red face. I had hoped he would not return, but perhaps underestimated the desire for vengeance that I gave him. I certainly did not invite the monster back to my home. But at least he came as a monster and was not in disguise as Willoughby had been. Come, Madame Cellier, are you not delighted to see me? I warned you I would return. Waller was 10 years my junior, and surprisingly strong for his lesser stature. With very little effort, he dragged me back to the kitchen, where Dowdall leaned against the wall beside the door to the back of the house, as yet unseen. Perhaps they did not see him because he had held no importance for them. I watched as he slipped away out of the door before the last of Waller's men were even in the room. If only I had left more swiftly, I may have been far away by now. My children must be somewhere nearby, though they were quiet and it did not draw scrutiny to themselves. Perhaps they smelt the wickedness of the priest-catcher as he approached, or sensed the urgency of Dowdall's warning and hid away, else they had preceded Dowdall out the door, with Hope the last. Either way, not even little Maggie, who rarely stayed quiet, could be heard, for which I could only release my breath in a long, slow sigh of relief. I would gladly supply invited guests with mulled sack or cider, yet must admit to having none to sweeten you with. I fear we midwives drink so much ourselves we have little left over for entertaining. My intuition told me I should play the female card, for he saw himself as a man of honour, though he was not. Do not fret, Madame Cellier. We will make our own entertainment. Perhaps you have superstitious blood we might drink instead. Waller's men laughed at his supposed wit, casting aspersions on the red wine used in communion. The men all carried swords at their sides, so I swallowed the quip about communion blood running stronger than his own to the king. I would be delighted if you would have wine and wafer with me, Sir Waller, but I think you do not have the taste for it. And I would be delighted if you would stand aside while we did the work we came to do, but fear you would rather hinder me in the path of justice. I would stand aside if I knew what side to stand on, I said. You stand on the wrong side, Madame Cellier, he responded. You choose the wrong side when you chose to stand on the side of the devil. Sir Waller was not amused by my having a voice, and took amusement in degrading me. What causes you to think that? I walk with God, and he walks with me. The sound of them searching the children's bedchamber and ours broke our conversation gave me fervent wish to discover what they were doing. Even in this room where we stood as before, his men ransacked the same cupboards and drawers they had searched previously, but this time they also lifted and moved the cupboards to look behind and stamped on the wood planks, perhaps hoping to find a secret hole where treasonable things were hidden. Since I did not know where anything was hidden, I could not react if they came close. In that, the Judas serpent was right. My innocence might save me. "You are mistaken, madam. He walks with true believers, not those of superstitious beliefs. You have chosen the Popish ways, and they are against the king's rules, and against the king himself. We have testimony that you hide proof of your traitorousness in this house, and we will find them. Your friend Dangerfield has told us all we need to know about your scheme, and he has revealed that he has seen the proof here. Admit your scheme now, and we will be lighter on you." "Who is this Dangerfield? I know him not." "You tell me you do not know one who has lived under your very roof with you? This I cannot believe." "I know of no Dangerfield," I insisted. "Perhaps you know him by the name of Captain Thomas Willoughby?" he said, then smiled when he saw my understanding grow. "I know Willoughby, but not Dangerfield," I reiterated. "Do not play games with me, madam. You must know they are one and the same. We walked up the stairs while we talked. Through the open door to the children's bedchamber, I watched as a man pulled the bed linen off the beds and then lifted the mattress to find nothing beneath. Then he took his knife and slashed the mattress open and pulled the horsehair out." "I did not know that," I said, "but I have no scheme to tell you." "We know the scheme, but if you will save yourself, you must admit to it now." "Would you have me lie to save myself?" "No, I would have you tell the truth and admit your plan to kill the king and to aid the duke." I followed Waller back down the stairs to the kitchen. I answered to his back. The kitchen was being ransacked. I am a loyal subject to both king and duke, and would only protect them with all honesty and goodness in me." As I said this, a man stopped lifting lids off my pewter pans and raised the lid of the butter tub. Then, when he lifted the larger rice tub lid, I saw he would search the other food tubs also, and called out to him, "Keep your dirty hands out of my food," which was a mistake, for he immediately looked at Sir Waller and received a nod of agreement. He plunged his hands deep into the wood barrel right up to his elbow. Rice spilled onto the floor as he moved his searching hand inside. I thought he would turn the whole tub onto the floor. "Check the other tubs," said Sir Waller. They did not take long to find the papers Willoughby, or rather this man Dangerfield, gave me to hide and that Anne had hidden in the barrel of flour. "Here is treason!" Triumphantly, the man, his arms surrounded by a cloud of white meal, held the papers high in the air. "'Tis in the meal tub!"